We're going to be turning things over to Mary Jo and Cindy here in just a second. Here they come. We need to get going here. All right. I think we're still missing some people, but I think they're in the kitchen. That was here. Yeah, I'm gonna have you guys to look at me. But I'm afraid to wait any longer. So I'm going to introduce. We're going to talk about the legislative session, and I'm going to introduce Mary Jo Rodgers and Cindy Heine. They are our legislative liaisons in Frankfurt. When you get those calls to action and all that good stuff during the legislative session, these are the dynamos behind all of that. So I'm going to turn it over to them now.
Good afternoon, and I'm so glad to see you all. I haven't seen, can't hear you. Can't you guys, can you?
You can pull the thing.
Okay, can you hear me now? Hear me now?
Closer maybe, rather than lean over. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, good afternoon again. This legislative session, of course, was 2023. And it was the short session because they didn't deal with money, and they didn't want to open the budget, although they ended up doing it quietly, but they did. This is Cindy Heine ran a fabulous show this time. She and got together with a good committee that did a lot of work. They did. You could put.
Oh, I know. I'm Jen, do you mind pulling up the slides?
Yep, I'm getting them up. Thank you.
This committee that she put together, all volunteers, of course, met weekly via Zoom. They were given assignments of different bills that came through. And they got together on the Zoom meeting and discussed them and decided what kind of recommendation to make to the league board, the state league board. They just don't make the decisions themselves. They do it and go to the main board for them. Our primary goal this past year was the voting rights restitution. And of course, we've worked on this different times. We've had different sponsors in the legislature for the bills, but you can tell her next. Huh? Tell her next. Next. Who am I telling? This. Who wants to change the slides?
Oh, Jen. Oh, sorry, Jen's changing them.
Okay. This is what our main goal was the restoration bill. But we ended up, as the bills came through and activities came through in the state, having to work hard on guns on campus and the anti-trans legislation, that 150, that Senate 150 bill that everybody just cringed about. So next. Okay. This was what happened also in this committee. There was a Zoom meetings. They attended as many legislative committee meetings. They also, KET broadcast of the sessions every day. Not only the Senate and the House and the committee meetings. And so I'm sure Cindy and I and many others, people are TV on all the time. You can do the dishes and cook and all sorts of stuff when you're not going down to Frankfurt. So be sure and watch those. They're terribly interesting, and you can see the personalities of the legislators through them. 14 action alerts were sent out by Cindy and crew, and we really need as much support on those as we possibly can, and Fran testified against House Bill 470, the transgender bill, and she was also prepared to do 2 or 3 others where the legislature says, we don't have any more time, like, now they have time for the people who represent different businesses, and they tend to go first, and then all of a sudden they do the nonprofits, and sometimes their time is run out. Cindy, as I said, I told her it was Cindy and her posse, because she got a lot of other people to come down and go to Frankfurt and go to the different sessions. And so this is what they did. And successful, maybe not so successful, but we did get one bill through. Click it.
Next.
Next. Thank you. We had a good hybrid meeting at League Day at the Capitol. They're always so much fun to go to. And had a press conference, and this is quote, the League's core value is that voting is the central expression of citizenship, and every citizen of our Commonwealth should be protected in the right to vote. And we went through all of Martin Luther King, so we couldn't find any better thing.
There. I got it. Okay, all right, thank you. Mary Jo used to work in the LRC, and she is invaluable in having background information. I want to also just say that we use Bill Track 50, and Becky Jones has become the master of that app, that system, a way to track bills, as well as get a nice list up on our website of the bills that we support or oppose. And so watch for that. It's always, once we get started, on the website, usually on the home page each year. Next, please. We noticed a huge issue about bill readings. And so we were able to gather together a small team, and we're working on it. So watch more. You heard about that in the programs. And that's one of the reasons that got into the program this year. Next, please. Key legislative issues we expect to hear about, and these are not all of them, but these are big ones. Probably a constitutional amendment on whether we can use state tax money for private schools. That is the priority for a lot of the members of leadership. Our priority would be a constitutional amendment to allow people to vote after they have completed sentencing once and those folks who had a delegate conviction. We're very hopeful about that. I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. Reproductive rights is an issue that is always huge, but that's awaiting. They're not going to do anything, I don't think, until they get that court ruling. There were 4 or 5 bills filed. None of them were heard this time. I think they were also kind of taking a break after they lost the amendment last fall. So they kind of backed off on that issue. Redistricting is something that could come back up. That too is awaiting a court decision. You'll notice I brought our gerrymandered congressional map. I also brought copies if you would like to take copies of that home with you and share it anytime you have an opportunity. So people, when we get to the next round of redistricting, can understand how important it is that we have public input with our redistricting. Next, please. And here's our map. And as you can see, it's probably the most gerrymandered map we've ever had. It's terrible. District 1 is the yellow that goes from the Mississippi River all the way up to Frankfurt. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. So some people living in Franklin County now have a representative that represents all of West Kentucky. Okay, next, please. Our objectives were for the coming session. This is where I want to get you involved. This is the most important part of this session. We are hopeful that we're gonna put a campaign together to pass this legislation to get an amendment on the Constitution, or to the Constitution on the ballot. So we have goals for the interim. The interim is June to December. Committee meetings meet interim joint committee meetings. So the House and Senate meeting committees meet together. I have the schedule if anybody wants to watch or go to Frankfurt and watch. I'll be glad to share that with you. But we'd like to get people there as often.
Are
as
they
we
on
can.
Zoom?
They're on the LRC website.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And I can show you where.
Thanks.
We want to listen and learn because the interim sessions are where they begin to talk about the issues that they're gonna address in the session. Not always, there are lots of surprises, but it's a way to get some background, but it's also to be in presence. Because I can't tell you how many times people say to us when we're in Frankfurt with our buttons, we're glad you're here. You're important, and I think we heard that from Joe Bird last night. We heard that from our national leaders, just being there, watching is important. And then we're gonna conduct this campaign to get a bill passed this time, we hope. We would like local leads to make an effort to meet with their own legislators. Number one, some of you have new representatives because of the redistricting, and you may or may not know your legislator. I want you to get to know them, find out what their priorities are, and ask them if they would support a bill to restore voting rights automatically. And then we also want to get a good bill pre-filed and heard in committee this fall. Next, please. We have collaborated with a lot of groups. We talked about collaboration earlier. Mary Jo mentioned that, but there are a lot of folks out there also focusing on restoring voting rights. The Voting Rights Coalition, a huge group of folks, we've been working with them a number of years. Civic Engagement Table, they've been very helpful in providing grants and other supports to us. We're now working with the University of Kentucky Law School students. They have their own legal clinic and they're interested in expungement clinics. And we're talking about going into prisons to register and help people vote pre-trial. In other words, they've been accused but not convicted, and they have every right to vote. And we are working on that. So we're working, that's a new project. And then we're also working with ABLE, which is a new organization of people who have been affected by and lost their vote because of conviction. And they're one fantastic group of folks. They're really great. Okay, next. What happened in 2022 or 2023 session was encouraging. One vote passed, one bill passed that made it easier to expunge juvenile records. That was sponsored by Representative Susan Miles, who is a Republican, and it passed handily. Next slide. There were other bills that were filed that got no action, but the fact that they were filed is important. House Bill 97 by Representative Heron, a Democrat from Jefferson County, would have restored voting rights automatically after completion of sentence. Senator Storm, a Republican from London, filed an even better bill because his bill excluded the requirement to have to complete paying your fines, fees, and restitution before you got your, you could get your right to vote back before that was finished. Still have to pay them, but you don't have to wait for what might take years to finish paying all that stuff. So that's really encouraging because he's a Republican. He's very, very strong on this issue, and we're feeling pretty confident that he will file another bill. And he's actually will be working with him this session. And then there were two bills that didn't get passed, but what I want you to notice is they were similar bills filed by a Democrat and a Republican that would have allowed for automatic expungement of certain offenses after a certain time period. Great idea. The encouraging piece for us is that we now have Republicans filing these bills and interested in this issue. And to be quite honest, I think what the Republicans have decided is that Republicans and Democrats both commit
crimes. There's been this myth that if you give people the right to vote back, they're gonna vote Democratic. Well, that's not true. And I think finally there's an understanding that this is an important issue. It's not gonna hurt. Okay, that's my commentary for the day. Next, please. We have a state position that we created in 2005 that we would restore voting rights automatically by completion of sentence. That means everything: probation, parole, incarceration, fees, fines, etc. That was 2005 when we didn't know as much. What we have discovered, next please, is that the national position basically, and I hope you can see the bolded, the reforms that we're supporting now would include ending felony disenfranchisement altogether. That gives us a huge amount of flexibility in terms of what we can support in terms of a bill. So that's what we're using right now. Next, please. What we're asking local leagues to do, and I've got a folder for each local group and anybody else interested, is to meet with your Republicans sometime between now and December. Ask them about their priorities, ask them if they'll support restoration of voting rights, find out what kind of questions they have. Ask if they co-sponsor, if they're supportive, and then let us know what you learn. And I've got all that written down in this folder. Next, please. The other ways that you as local folks can help is if you are holding candidate forums, or if you want to host a community forum, we'll be glad to help you. Collaborate with other groups to share information about this issue. If you're holding candidate forums, be sure to ask, have one of the questions being, would you support automatic restoration of voting rights? Next. The other thing that we are trying to focus on is helping identify folks who have had their rights restored and don't know it, and get them registered and get them voting. Most of you have been out there registering voters, and same thing has happened to you. I'm sure that's happened to me. Somebody goes by, you say, would you like to register to vote? And they, their eyes drop and they shake their heads. I can't. Well, it's because they had a conviction and they think they can't vote. But a lot of people have been restored. If they have a nonviolent conviction by the Governor Andy Shear's executive order on December 29th. Have with you when you're registering voters the information that you need to help them check. We've got these handy dandy little cards that Jen created a year or so ago that has the email address, the phone number, the website, where you could go on and automatically check if your rights have been restored. And then right away, once you find out they have been restored, you can register. So there's a link on that website. For people who are interested in expungement, the Clean Slate Kentucky is the source, the go-to place. There's information about that. And we also have the application for restoration of voting rights available, again, in this packet. It's been simplified with this particular administration. And for people who have not been had rights restored because of the executive order, they can apply for individual pardons. That's not going well right now. This governor is not passing or not dealing with very many of those. So we're going to undertake a little campaign pretty soon to kind of push him to consider looking at more of those applications. Okay, next please. Most important talking points on this issue: 161,000 people can't vote. Kentucky is one of only 3 states that permanently disenfranchise people with convictions. Polling shows that Kentuckians 2-to-1 support automatic restoration. We believe in second chances. We believe if somebody has paid their dues, then they ought to get the right to vote back. Keep in mind, remember that this was put in our Constitution in the late 1800s. You know what was happening then? States were rewriting their constitutions, putting all kinds of things in to disenfranchise the African American vote. And that's what happened in Kentucky. So that's a
a bygone. We ought to get rid of that issue change. We also know that restoring voting rights does increase public safety, and we need a clear, consistent rule in the Constitution that makes it clear who can and can't vote, and we don't have this confusion about who can pass what's not been a part of it. Okay, next. We, the Civil Rights Committee, Restoration Committee, and TIP is an important part of that. TIP, raise your hand. And the legislative team will be glad to help you with information and materials. That's what this is all about. We'd be glad to join with you to meet legislators if you want. We can help you identify folks who have gone through this experience and can speak either in a hearing or public meeting, or being quoted in a paper, a story in the paper. And we can be available to speak to your groups, your community. We talked to Hopkinsville, Tip and I did about a month or so ago. And we'd be glad to talk with your local leagues or any civic groups. Next, I think this is the last one. Get a hold of Mary Jo or me if you've got questions. I'll be sure that everybody, each local league gets a copy of this, and if anybody else wants one, let us know.
Any questions for Cindy and Mary Jo? I'll tell you, they do just a terrific job. If you know, well, I better get to the microphone. And then yeah. If we had to pay for their lobbying skills, our budget would look, well, you wouldn't believe what our budget would look like. They bring experience. It's not just knowing the issues, it's knowing how the legislature works and being up there and being known and trusted by the legislators. I think that the legislators up there, they may not always agree with us, but they believe the information we give them is fair. And so we can't thank them enough for all the work they do.